My name is Iris Chen. I'm 27 years old. For 18 years, my parents called me the forgetful one, while my brother Julian collected Stanford degrees and boardroom invitations. They mocked my ADHD at holiday dinners, excluded me from family decisions, and paid me a third of what they paid him. But on Julian's promotion day at the Fairmont, in front of 400 guests, a stranger handed me a folder that would expose every lie my parents ever told about me. What they didn't know, my grandfather had been watching. He saw everything, and he left me something that would flip the entire Chen Holdings upside down. The Chens were old money San Francisco, the kind of family whose name appeared on university buildings and symphony hall plaques. My father, Richard Chen, ran Chen Holdings, a venture capital firm my grandfather, Samuel, had built from a single seed investment in a Berkeley garage in 1972. By 2025, the firm managed $110 million in assets. I was born with ADHD, diagnosed at 8. My brain would spark and wander, turning simple tasks into mazes that took me twice as long to navigate than other kids. My parents' response wasn't support, it was embarrassment. When I was 13, they hired tutors for Julian, coding boot camps at Stanford, Mandarin immersion in Taipei, MBA prep with a Wharton graduate who charged $500 an hour. When I asked about getting help with my focus, my mother Vivian just sighed. Iris, we've already spent so much on evaluations. At some point, we have to accept that some children just aren't built for structure. I was 13. I believed her, so I learned to adapt on my own. Voice memos became my lifeline. I developed a system of color-coded calendars, spatial memory maps, and kinetic learning techniques that helped me process information in ways traditional classrooms couldn't. And every Saturday morning, I'd take the BART to my grandfather Samuel's cottage in Berkeley, where he'd sit with me for hours, explaining concepts through movement instead of textbooks. "Iris," he told me once, his calloused hand covering mine. "Your mind moves faster than most, but it moves sideways. That's not a deficit, sweetheart. That's a different kind of navigation." I didn't fully understand what he meant. Then I would eventually, but first I had to survive another 17 years of being the Chen family's inconvenient daughter. Thanksgiving 2019, 18 relatives gathered around the teak table in my parents' Pacific Heights mansion. Floor-to-ceiling windows, catered dinner, the annual performance of Chen family excellence. My father stood at the head of the table, wine glass raised. "I'd like to make an announcement," he said, his voice carrying that investor authority he wore like a second skin. "Julian has been promoted to senior associate at Andreessen Horowitz, full partnership track." Applause, cheers. Julian blushed with practiced modesty. "My eldest son," Richard continued, beaming, "will be the first Chen to make partner at a Tier 1 firm in 2 generations. He's going to take this family and this legacy to extraordinary heights." More applause. Uncle David clapped Julian on the shoulder. Aunt May dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Then my father's gaze drifted down the table, to me. "And Iris," he paused. The warmth in his voice evaporated. "Well, Iris is also here." A few relatives chuckled. Soft, uncomfortable laughs, the kind people make when they don't know what else to do. Julian didn't defend me. He laughed along with them. I stared at my plate. The heritage turkey blurred through the tears I refused to let fall. Under the table, a hand found mine. Thin fingers, papery skin. Grandpa Samuel, seated across from me, squeezed gently. When I looked up, his eyes held something fierce, something that looked almost like fury directed at his own son. He didn't say anything. Not then. But 2 months later, he called me to his cottage, said he needed to show me something important. I didn't know it at the time, but that Thanksgiving dinner, that moment of casual cruelty in front of 18 witnesses, had set something in motion, something that would take 5 years to detonate. After graduating from a state university in 2023, not Stanford, never Stanford, I applied for a position at Chen Holdings. I wanted to prove I could contribute, that the family firm could be my path too. My father agreed to hire me as a logistics coordinator. Salary, $48,000 a year. That same month, Julian joined as director of strategic investments. His salary, $320,000 plus bonuses. My job consisted of scheduling meetings, booking conference rooms, and fetching reports for analysts who never learned my name. I wasn't invited to a single deal review, never shown a single term sheet, but I watched and I listened. I discovered something about myself during those long hours in the supply closet we called an office. I could spot connections others missed. When executives discussed portfolio companies in the hallway, I'd map the relationships between founders, the flow of capital, the potential conflicts. A skill I developed to compensate for my wandering focus had become something else entirely. Grandpa Samuel had taught me this. During those Saturday mornings at his cottage, he'd spread out old term sheets from the firm's early days and show me how to read them, not line by line, but as systems, as networks. "Your father reads deals like a banker," he told me once in 2020, just before his health started declining. "He looks for what he can extract. You read them like a cartographer. You see how all the rivers connect." That same day, he'd handed me a small brass box tarnished with a jade clasp. "Keep this safe," he'd said. "Don't open it yet. When you need it, you'll know." I'd taken the box home, tucked it in my closet, and tried to forget the strange weight of his words. April 2020, Grandpa Samuel's cottage. He was 84 then, his once vigorous frame grown thin, his white hair wispy against the pillow of his reading chair, but his eyes, those sharp, knowing eyes, hadn't dimmed at all. "Sit down, Iris." I sat across from him in the living room where I'd spent so many Saturday mornings. The walls were covered with photographs. Samuel shaking hands with the founders of Apple in 1977. Samuel at the IPO of a semiconductor company in 1985. Samuel accepting a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Asian Business League in 1995. Not a single photo of my father at the helm. "I built Chen Holdings from nothing," he said, his voice carrying decades of steel. "One garage, one checkbook, 50 years of work, your father." He paused, and something bitter flickered across his face. "Your father inherited it, he didn't build it. He doesn't understand what it means to create something. Grandpa, he judges people by their credentials, their degrees, their ability to perform in pitch meetings." He leaned forward. "I judge people by how they treat those who can't keep up. You, Iris, you're the only one in this family who knows how to be patient." He pressed the brass box into my hands. "There's something inside that might help you someday, but not yet. You're not ready yet, and neither is Richard." His grip tightened. "When the time comes, when he shows you exactly who he is, you'll know what to do." I wanted to ask what he meant, what was inside, why he'd chosen me, but he changed the subject, started talking about his garden, the Warriors game, the book he was listening to. 16 months later, he was gone, heart failure. I held his hand in the hospice, the only family member at his bedside. The box remained unopened in my closet. March 2025. The email arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. Subject line: "Role transition confidential. Dear Ms. Chen, as part of our ongoing organizational optimization, your current position will be eliminated. Effective June 1st, 2025. HR will contact you regarding severance options." I read it 3 times. The words swam, rearranged, settled back into the same devastating message. They were firing me. That evening, I stayed late organizing files no one would ever look at. Through the thin wall separating my closet office from my father's corner suite, I heard voices. Richard and Vivian. "Can't have her here when Julian takes over the family office," my father was saying. "It looks bad. The founder's daughter working as a scheduler. People will ask questions." "What kind of questions?" "Why she's not in leadership, why we haven't promoted her." A pause. "Why she's the way she is." My mother's response came soft, almost gentle. "We've done everything we could for her, Richard. Some children just don't have what it takes." "Exactly, so she needs to go. We'll give her a generous severance. She can find something else, something more suited to her abilities." I pressed my palm against the wall. $48,000 a year. My studio in Oakland, shared with 2 roommates, cost $2,200 a month. No savings, no safety net. If I lost this job, I'd be couch surfing within 6 weeks. But the money wasn't what made my chest tight. It was the realization settling into my bones like frost. If I let them do this, if I accepted their version of who I was, I would spend the rest of my life as the family failure. Not because I'd actually failed, but because I'd never been given the chance to succeed. Julian's promotion party was tomorrow. I wondered what other announcements my father had planned. May 14th, 2025. The Fairmont Hotel, Grand Ballroom. 400 guests filled the gilded room. Limited partners, portfolio founders, lawyers from white shoe firms, extended family members I barely recognized. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across silk tablecloths. A jazz quartet played Mingus in the corner. This was Richard Chen's kingdom, his stage, the place where he performed his role as patriarch, as mogul, as the man who had everything. I stood in the entrance, tugging at the hem of my dress, navy, simple $89 from Uniqlo, the most I could afford on my salary. Everyone else glittered in designer gowns and tailored suits. My mother intercepted me before I could find a seat. "Iris!" Vivian's gaze traveled from my drugstore mascara to my scuffed flats, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You couldn't find anything nicer. This is what I have." "Well," she adjusted her Cartier bracelet, "you'll be at table 32 near the kitchen entrance. Try not to draw attention to yourself." "Of course, and Iris." She leaned closer, her Chanel No. 5 overwhelming. "Tonight is Julian's night. Whatever you're feeling, whatever resentment you think you're entitled to, keep it to yourself. Don't embarrass us." She walked away before I could respond. Table 32 was at the back of the ballroom, partially hidden behind a pillar. My table mates were distant cousins I'd met maybe twice. From my seat, I could see the main stage, the massive portrait of Julian in his business casual, the banner reading, "Congratulations, Julian Chen, Senior Associate." And near the entrance, standing alone by the door, a silver-haired woman in a charcoal suit. She wasn't mingling, wasn't eating, just watching. Her eyes found mine across the crowded room. Something cold prickled down my spine. At 8:30 p.m., the quartet stopped. The lights dimmed. A spotlight illuminated the stage where my father stood, champagne flute raised. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate an extraordinary young man." The applause began before he finished the sentence. "Julian closed 3 deals this quarter worth $40 million in aggregate. He sourced a Series B round for a climate tech company that just hit unicorn status. And last month, he was named to Forbes 30 Under 30. Richard's voice swelled with pride. "But tonight, I'm not just celebrating his achievements, I'm announcing his future." Julian joined him on stage, radiant in a Brioni suit. "Effective immediately, Julian Chen will inherit my entire estate upon my passing. This includes our family residence at 2800 Broadway, currently valued at $18 million, a Tesla Model X Plaid, and most importantly," he paused for effect, "the position of managing partner of Chen Holdings when I retire." The room erupted. Standing ovation, camera flashes. Julian dabbed at his eyes with performative grace. 400 people celebrating, and not one of them glanced at table 32. The cousin beside me, a man I'd met at a funeral 6 years ago, leaned over. "Iris, right? So what does that mean for you?" I opened my mouth, closed it. What could I say? That I'd just been formally erased from my own family. That the termination letter in my inbox was only the beginning. That every fear I'd ever had about being worthless had just been confirmed in front of everyone who mattered. The applause died down. Julian hugged our father. Cameras clicked. And through the crowd, the silver-haired woman at the door began walking toward me. Slowly, deliberately, like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. The woman stopped at my table. Up close, I could see she was older than I'd thought, early 60s, with deep-set eyes and the careful posture of someone who spent her life in courtrooms. "Miss Chen, that's me." I straightened in my chair. "Can I help you? My name is Patricia Wu." She pulled a business card from her breast pocket, cream-colored, embossed, "Wu and Fong, attorneys at law. I was your grandfather's lawyer." My grandfather. The words hit like a punch. "Samuel passed away 4 years ago." "I'm aware." She didn't sit, didn't soften. "He left something for you with very specific instructions about when to deliver it." From inside her jacket, she produced a manila folder, heavy stock, sealed with red wax bearing a notary stamp. "What is this?" "His trust documents, the real ones." Her voice dropped. "The ones your father doesn't know exist." I stared at the folder. The notary seal read Wu and Fong. September 3rd, 2020. 5 months after that Saturday morning at his cottage. 5 months after he'd handed me the brass box. "I don't understand." "Your grandfather gave me explicit instructions. I was to deliver this document on the day your father publicly disinherited you." Wu glanced toward the stage where Richard and Julian were still basking in applause. "I believe that just occurred." My hands trembled as I took the folder. "Ms. Wu, what's in here?" For the first time, something almost like warmth flickered in her eyes. "Mr. Samuel told me to tell you. Give this to Iris on the day Richard shows her exactly who he is. By then, she'll be ready." She straightened her jacket. "I'll be available when you have questions. You have my card." Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I couldn't breathe in that ballroom. I pushed through the service entrance, found an empty hallway near the kitchen. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The sounds of celebration muffled to a distant hum. My fingers shook as I broke the wax seal. Inside, 5 pages of dense legal text, a notarized signature. A date, September 3rd, 2020. I read slowly, carefully. The words swam, but I forced them into focus. I, Samuel Wei Chen, being of sound mind and body, do hereby revoke all previous trust declarations and declare this to be my final and binding trust amendment. My eyes caught on a paragraph near the middle. To my granddaughter, Iris May Chen, I bequeath 52% of my voting shares in Chen Holdings, LLC, currently valued at approximately $57 million, along with all governance rights associated therewith. I read it again and again. 52%. Controlling interest. The document continued. This bequest is made with full knowledge of my son Richard's treatment of Iris. She has been excluded, diminished, and denied opportunity, not due to lack of ability, but due to lack of support. Iris is not forgetful. Iris was abandoned, and I will not allow her father's impatience to continue after my death. A sob caught in my throat. Grandpa had seen. He'd seen everything. Condition. To activate this bequest, Iris must formally request an emergency partners meeting within 72 hours of receiving this document. Failure to act within this window will render this amendment null and void, and all assets shall transfer per my 2015 declaration. 72 hours. The deadline would fall at 8:30 p.m. on May 17th. I leaned against the cold wall, the document clutched to my chest. My grandfather had given me a weapon. Now I had to decide if I was brave enough to use it. Patricia Wu was waiting by the coat check when I emerged. "You read it! The 72-hour clause." My voice cracked. "Why would he put that in?" "Your grandfather knew you, Miss Chen." She handed me a second card, this one with a personal cell number handwritten on the back. "He knew that if he gave you unlimited time, you might convince yourself not to act. The deadline isn't a punishment, it's permission. Permission to stop waiting for your family to change their minds about you, to take what's rightfully yours." She checked her watch. "The deadline is 8:30 p.m. May 17th, 3 days. If you want to proceed, you'll need to submit a formal request for an emergency partners meeting. I can help you draft it." Through the ballroom doors, I could see my father still on stage, posing for photographs with Julian. My mother circulated among guests, accepting congratulations as if she'd earned them herself. If I did this, if I invoked the trust, I would destroy every relationship I had left. My parents would never forgive me. Julian would see it as betrayal. But if I stayed silent, I would accept their verdict. I would become exactly what they'd always said I was, the forgetful one, the unfocused one, the daughter who didn't matter. "Ms. Wu," Ellis's voice cut through my spiral. "Your grandfather believed in you. He spent the last 4 years of his life preparing for this moment. The question is, do you believe in yourself?" I looked at the document in my hands. At the elegant signature of the man who'd held my hand under Thanksgiving tables and taught me to read term sheets like maps. "I'll call you tomorrow," I said. "We're requesting that meeting." Wu allowed herself a small smile. "He said you would." I'm going to pause here for just a moment. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to believe in you, if you know what it feels like to be dismissed, I want you to comment the word "enough" below. Let me know I'm not alone in this. And if you want to see what happened when I walked into that partners meeting, keep watching because we're just getting started. Now, back to the story. That night, back in my cramped Oakland apartment, I finally opened the brass box. My roommates were asleep. The only light came from the street lamp outside my window, casting orange stripes across my bed, where I sat cross-legged, the tarnished box in my lap. The jade clasp clicked as I lifted the lid. Inside, a handwritten letter on Samuel's personal stationery, a faded document with a 1972 date stamp, and a USB drive, sleek and modern, clearly added much later. I reached for the letter first. "My dearest Iris, if you're reading this, then Patricia has done her job, and your father has done exactly what I feared he would. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you while I was alive, but I can protect you now." The enclosed document is the original partnership agreement from 1972, when I founded Chen Holdings with 2 colleagues who have long since passed. Your father has never seen it. It establishes that the founders' shares carry permanent voting rights that cannot be diluted or transferred without unanimous partner approval. The USB contains something else, something your father hoped I'd forgotten. In 2019, Richard proposed a resolution to reduce my voting shares from 52% to 15%. His stated reason: I was too old to understand modern tech investing. The real reason, he wanted control, and I was in his way. The partners rejected his proposal by 2 votes. I was one of those votes. I never forgot what he tried to do, and I never forgave him for the way he treated you to justify it, as though diminishing you somehow proved I was unfit. Use this wisely, Iris, not for revenge, for justice. All my love, Grandpa Samuel. I plugged the USB into my laptop. The file was labeled Partners Meeting Minutes, March 2019, PDF. My father's attempt to strip his own father of power, documented, time-stamped, evidence. May 15th, 9:00 a.m. Margaret Fong answered on the second ring. Iris Chen. Her voice carried the rasp of someone who negotiated term sheets for decades and laughed at the ones that didn't make sense. I've been wondering when you'd call. You know who I am. Sweetheart, your grandfather and I funded half the startups in the Bay together in the 80s. He talked about you constantly. A pause. He also told me about the trust 3 years ago, right before he passed. I gripped my phone tighter. Then you know what I'm about to do. I know what you're considering doing. There's a difference. Margaret's tone shifted. Sharper now, more businesslike. You want to request an emergency partners meeting? That requires 3 general partners to sign the petition. I'm one, you'll need 2 more. Can you help me find them? I can do better than that. I heard papers shuffling in the background. Richard Chen isn't as popular as he thinks. His management style is, let's call it, impatient. At least 4 partners have expressed concerns privately. They just need someone to go first. Hope sparked in my chest. Who? David Park, Linda Okonkwo, she corrected herself. Linda Okonkwo Park, they've both been on the receiving end of Richard's temper in closed sessions. I'll make some calls. Another pause. Iris, I need you to understand something. This isn't going to be pleasant. Your father will fight. Your brother will fight. They'll say terrible things. They've been saying terrible things my whole life. Margaret laughed, a warm, genuine sound. Samuel always said you would steal under all that quiet. I'm starting to see what he meant. She cleared her throat. I'll have the petition ready by tonight. Partners meeting request, May 17th, 10:00 a.m. Chen Tower, 38th floor. Thank you, Margaret. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you're sitting in that conference room. May 16th. Richard found out about the partners meeting at 3:00 p.m. I know this because Julian called me 30 minutes later, his voice tight with controlled fury. What did you do? I was sitting in my closet office at Chen Holdings, pretending to organize files. I don't know what you're talking about. Dad just got a notice from the firm's secretary. Emergency meeting tomorrow. Requested by Margaret Fong and 2 other partners. A pause, sharp as broken glass. Margaret Fong hasn't requested anything in 20 years. What did you do? Maybe she has concerns about firm management. Don't play games with me, Iris. Julian's composure cracked. If you're trying to embarrass us, trying to make some kind of scene. I'm just doing my job, Julian, same as always. He hung up without saying goodbye. 20 minutes later, Richard stormed past my closet office on his way to his suite. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge I existed, just slammed his door hard enough to rattle the windows through the wall. I heard him on the phone. Ridiculous waste of time. Margaret's probably going senile. We'll address her concerns and move on. No, I'm not worried. Iris? My God, Julian, she can barely read a cap table. She's not a threat to anyone. I smiled. For the first time in 27 years, being underestimated felt like an advantage. That night in my apartment, I prepared. Printed 3 copies of the trust, downloaded the 2019 partners minutes onto my phone as backup, wrote a brief statement, not an accusation, just a presentation of facts. Patricia Wu confirmed she'd attend as the authenticating attorney. Margaret texted at 11 p.m. petition filed. See you tomorrow. Your grandfather would be proud. I barely slept, but for once it wasn't anxiety keeping me awake. It was anticipation. May 17th, 2025. 9:45 a.m. Chen Tower. The elevator opened onto the 38th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, Italian marble, the kind of corporate opulence designed to intimidate. I stepped out in a borrowed charcoal blazer. Roommates, 2 sizes too big, carrying a leather portfolio I'd bought at a thrift store for $15. The security guard at the conference room door held up his hand. Name? Iris Chen. He checked his tablet, frowned. You're not on the authorized attendee list. I'm a Chen Holdings employee and I have business with the partners. Ma'am, this is a restricted meeting. I can't let you. Is there a problem? Julian's voice behind me. I turned. He looked immaculate. Navy power suit, Patek Philippe, the uniform of someone who belonged in conference rooms. Iris. His smile didn't reach his eyes. What are you doing here? I have information to present to the partners. Information, Julian laughed. A sharp, performative sound. About what? You work in scheduling. The nature of my presentation is confidential. You don't even know what IRR stands for. Internal rate of return, it's not that complicated. Julian's smile flickered. Before he could respond, our father appeared at the end of the hallway, flanked by two senior partners. What's going on here? Iris wants to attend the partners' meeting. Julian said, I was just explaining that's not possible. Actually, a voice called from inside the conference room. It does. Margaret Fong appeared in the doorway, 74 years old, silver-haired, standing with the quiet authority of someone who'd been writing term sheets when Richard was still in business school. I invited her. She is standing to address the partners. Margaret smiled. Let her in. Richard's jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he might physically block the door, but Margaret Fong had been a general partner for 35 years. Her authority in that room exceeded his. Fine. My father's voice was ice. Let her speak. We'll see how long it takes before she embarrasses herself. The conference room was smaller than I'd imagined. An oval table of polished walnut, 14 leather chairs, portraits of past partners on the walls, including, I noticed, my grandfather Samuel, his painted eyes seeming to watch from above the fireplace. 14 partners took their seats. Richard at the head, Julian to his right, not officially a partner yet, but positioned as heir apparent. I was directed to a chair at the far end, the children's table of venture capital governance. In the corner, Patricia Wu sat with her briefcase. She caught my eye, nodded once. Robert Hartley, the managing director, a distinguished man in his mid-60s who'd known my grandfather for decades, called the meeting to order. This emergency session was requested by Margaret Fong, David Park, and Linda Okonkwo Park. Margaret, you have the floor. Margaret rose. Thank you, Robert. I'll keep my remarks brief. She gestured toward me. The matter I wish to address concerns a document that has recently come to light, a document that affects the ownership structure of this firm. She yielded her time. Miss Iris Chen. All eyes turned to me. Julian smirked. Richard leaned back in his chair with theatrical boredom. I stood. My hands were steadier than I expected. Thank you, Ms. Fong. And thank you to the partners for allowing me to speak. I opened my portfolio. What I'm about to present may come as a surprise to some of you. I ask only that you listen to the evidence before reaching any conclusions. Richard sighed audibly. I ignored him. Before I could continue, my father raised his hand. I'm sorry, Robert, but before we waste the partner's valuable time, Richard stood, buttoning his jacket with deliberate slowness. Iris is my daughter. His voice carried that patronizing warmth he used for difficult founders. And I love her, but she's not qualified to address this partnership on any business matter. She works in an administrative role. She has no legal training, no financial background, no deal experience. Julian chimed in, his tone dripping with false sympathy. Iris also has ADHD. She struggles with focus. We've tried to support her, but he shrugged elegantly. Some limitations can't be overcome with effort alone. A few partners shifted uncomfortably. What we're seeing here, Richard continued, is a troubled young woman acting out, perhaps due to the announcement at Julian's promotion party. Sibling jealousy is, Mr. Chen. Robert Hartley's voice cut through like a gavel. You'll have an opportunity to respond, but Miss Chen requested this time, and she's entitled to use it. Richard sat down. His expression promised consequences. Julian caught my eye and mouthed, You're embarrassing yourself. I looked at them both, my father, my brother, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, something colder, clearer. They weren't trying to protect me. They weren't even trying to protect the firm. They were trying to protect their version of the story, the version where I was nothing. Thank you, Mr. Hartley. I pulled the document from my portfolio. I won't be discussing my focus ability today. I'll be discussing this. I held up the trust. The room went silent. This is the final trust amendment of Samuel Wei Chen, founder of this firm, notarized September 3rd, 2020. Richard's face drained of color. That's impossible. His voice came out strangled. My father's trust was executed in 2015. I have a copy. You have a copy of his previous trust. I kept my voice level, clinical. Under California probate code, a subsequent valid trust amendment automatically revokes all prior declarations. This document, I placed it on the table, was executed 5 years after the one you possess. I slid the document to Robert Hartley. Ms. Wu, I gestured to Patricia, who rose from her corner seat. Would you please confirm the authenticity of this document? Wu approached the table. I'm Patricia Wu, partner at Wu and Fong. I served as Samuel Chen's personal attorney from 2005 until his death in 2021. I can confirm this trust was executed in my presence on September 3, 2020. It was witnessed by 2 independent notaries, and the original is held in escrow at Wells Fargo Private Bank. Robert Hartley studied the document. His eyebrows rose. This bequeaths 52% of Chen Holdings shares to... He looked up at me. To you, Miss Chen. Murmurs rippled around the table. That's a forgery, Julian said, but his voice had lost its confidence. It's not, Wu's response was immediate. And I'd advise you against making accusations of fraud without evidence, Mr. Chen. Wu and Fong's reputation speaks for itself. Richard slammed his palm on the table. This is absurd. My father was ill. He was being manipulated. Manipulated? I pulled out my phone. Perhaps you'd like to explain this then. I pressed play on the 2019 partners meeting audio. My father's voice filled the room. Samuel is 84 years old. He doesn't understand modern tech investing. I moved to reduce his voting shares to 15%. The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. That recording, Richard's face had turned a mottled purple. That was a private partners discussion which Samuel attended. I kept my voice steady. He recorded it as was his right as a founding partner. Robert Hartley set down the trust. His expression had shifted from neutral to something harder. Miss Chen, would you read the relevant passage aloud? For the record. I nodded, took a breath. To my granddaughter, Iris Chen, I bequeath 52% of my shares in Chen Holdings LLC, along with all governance rights associated therewith. I paused, letting the words settle. This bequest is made with full knowledge of my son Richard's treatment of Iris. She has been excluded, diminished, and denied opportunity, not due to lack of ability, but due to lack of support. Julian made a choking sound. Iris is not forgetful. Iris was abandoned, and I will not allow her father's impatience to continue after my death. I looked directly at my father. Richard has confused credentials with character, degrees with worth. He tried to strip me of my voting rights because I saw through him. He marginalized Iris because she reminded him of the kind of person he refuses to be. Richard said nothing. His hands, I noticed, were trembling. The trust concludes, I built this firm from nothing. I choose who carries it forward. I choose Iris. Robert Hartley removed his reading glasses. Patricia, you can confirm this document is legally binding. I can. The 2015 trust is superseded. As of this moment, Iris Chen is the majority partner of Chen Holdings. Margaret Fong smiled quietly. David Park and Lindo Okonkwo Park exchanged glances. And for the first time in my life, I watched my father look at me with something other than dismissal. It was fear. This doesn't prove anything, Julian said, but his voice had turned brittle. Even if the trust is valid, which will contest, Iris has no deal experience. She can't run a firm. I'm not asking to run the firm. I address the full partners now. I'm asking you to examine the facts. I pulled the 2019 partners minutes from my portfolio. March 14, 2019. Richard Chen proposed Resolution 2019-07 to reduce Samuel Chen's voting shares from 52% to 15%. His stated rationale, I found the passage. The founder is no longer capable of understanding modern tech investing. That was taken out of context, Richard started. The resolution failed by 2 votes, Samuel's vote and Margaret Fong's. Looked at Margaret. Is that accurate? Margaret nodded slowly. It is. Samuel called me that night. He was devastated, not because of the resolution, he knew it would fail, but because his own son had tried to take everything he'd built. This is ancient history, Richard started. It's evidence. I cut him off. Evidence that my grandfather wasn't suffering from diminished capacity when he wrote that 2020 trust. He was protecting himself from his own son, and he was protecting me. Robert Hartley looked around the table. Does anyone else have documentation contradicting what's been presented? Silence. Richard. My father's jaw worked. No words came. Julian. My brother stared at the table. His perfect composure had cracked entirely. David Park spoke for the first time. Robert, I think we need to recess and have legal counsel review these documents. Agreed. Hartley checked his watch. We'll reconvene in 15 minutes. Patricia, please remain available. The partners rose. Conversations broke out in hushed tones. Richard didn't move. He sat frozen, staring at his father's portrait on the wall. I wondered if he could feel him watching. 15 minutes stretched into 45. The firm's legal counsel, a thin man named Patterson, spent the entire time on his phone with Wu and Fong, Wells Fargo Private Bank, and the California Secretary of State's office. I sat alone at the end of the table. Patricia Wu brought me a glass of water. Margaret Fong patted my shoulder as she passed. Richard and Julian huddled in the corner, their whispered argument growing increasingly heated. Finally, Patterson returned to the table and whispered in Robert Hartley's ear. Hartley's expression flickered, surprise, then resignation. "Please take your seats." The partners filed back to their chairs. The tension in the room had crystallized into something brittle. "Our legal counsel has confirmed the following," Hartley read from his notes. "The trust presented by Miss Chen is valid under California law. It supersedes all previous trust declarations. Effective immediately, Iris Chen holds 52% of Chen Holdings shares." Someone inhaled sharply. "Additionally," Hartley continued, "as majority partner, Miss Chen has the right to propose motions to the partners, including matters pertaining to executive leadership." He looked at me. "Miss Chen, do you have any motions you wish to bring forward?" I stood. My heart was pounding, but my voice held steady. "I have one motion." Richard rose from his seat. "Robert, this is—" "Sit down, Richard." Hartley's voice carried unexpected steel. "Miss Chen has the floor." Richard sat. His face had gone gray. I looked around the table at 14 people who, until an hour ago, had never considered me capable of anything. Now they waited for my decision. The power to destroy my father's career was in my hands. I thought about what my grandfather would want, and I made my choice. "I'm not proposing to remove Richard Chen as managing partner." The tension in the room shifted. Julian's head snapped up. Even Margaret looked surprised. "What I am proposing," I continued, "is a vote of confidence. The partners will decide whether Richard Chen retains their confidence as managing partner of Chen Holdings. If the majority votes no confidence, he resigns. If the majority votes confidence, I will not interfere with operational leadership during my tenure as majority partner." "This is absurd," Julian stood. "You're turning this into a spectacle, a revenge fantasy." "No," I met his eyes. "This is partnership governance, the same process that exists in every well-run firm. The same process Grandpa Samuel established in our operating agreement 50 years ago." I paused. "If Dad has the partner's confidence, he has nothing to worry about." Robert Hartley studied me for a long moment. Something like respect flickered in his expression. "Is there a second for this motion?" "Seconded." Margaret Fong didn't hesitate. "Then we'll vote. All those expressing confidence in Richard Chen as managing partner, raise your hands." 4 hands went up. Richard's allies. People who owed their partnership to his recommendations. All those expressing no confidence. 7 hands rose. Robert Hartley counted twice. Then he set down his pen. "The motion carries 7-4 with 1 abstention." He turned to Richard. "Mr. Chen, the partners have voted no confidence. Per Section 12.3 of our operating agreement, you have 30 days to tender your resignation." Richard said nothing. He stood, looked at me, really looked at me. For what might have been the first time in my life, I expected rage, hatred, threats. What I saw was worse, recognition. The understanding that he'd underestimated me so completely that he'd lost everything. He walked out without a word. I know what some of you are thinking right now. Why didn't she just fire him? Why give him the chance to keep his job? Because revenge isn't justice. Because destroying someone doesn't undo what they did to you. And because my grandfather didn't raise me to be cruel. He raised me to be fair. If that resonates with you, hit subscribe, turn on notifications because the story isn't over. Not even close. Now back to what happened after that conference room cleared. Richard caught me in the private corridor outside the partner's room. Vivian was with him. Someone must have called her during the recess. Her face was tear-streaked, mascara bleeding down her cheeks. "You." Richard's voice was barely controlled. "You ungrateful, scheming." "Richard." Vivian put a hand on his arm. "Not here. Not here, she just destroyed our family in front of 14 people." I stood my ground. "I didn't destroy anything, I told the truth." "The truth," Richard laughed bitterly. "Your grandfather was manipulated. That lawyer Wu she must have. Grandpa Samuel wrote that trust 5 months after you tried to strip him of power because he saw exactly who you are." My voice didn't waver. "You didn't lose because I betrayed you. You lost because you betrayed him." Vivian stepped forward. "Iris, sweetheart, you have to understand, we were trying to protect you. You've always struggled. We didn't want to put pressure. You didn't protect me. You erased me." 27 years of silence crystallized into words. Every Thanksgiving dinner, every family photo, every conversation where you talked about Julian's achievements and pretended I didn't exist. That wasn't protection, that was abandonment. That's not fair. You're right, it wasn't fair. I met my mother's eyes. I spent my whole life trying to prove I was worthy of this family. I'm done proving. The documents speak for themselves. Richard grabbed my arm. This isn't over. We'll contest that trust. I pulled free. You'll lose, and you know it, because Grandpa Samuel planned for every contingency, including this one. I walked toward the elevator. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice. Iris, wait. I didn't wait. For the first time in my life, I didn't need their permission to leave. The elevator doors closed on my parents' faces. I leaned against the brushed steel wall, finally allowing myself to breathe. The adrenaline that had carried me through the past 2 hours began to ebb, leaving something unexpected in its wake. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Grief. I just severed 27 years of hoping things would change, of believing that if I was patient enough, quiet enough, good enough, my parents would eventually see me, love me the way they loved Julian. That hope was dead now. I'd killed it myself. The elevator descended 38 floors. By the time it reached the lobby, I'd wiped my eyes and straightened my borrowed blazer. Patricia Wu was waiting by the security desk. That was, she searched for the word, remarkable. It was necessary. Your grandfather would agree. She fell into step beside me as I walked toward the exit. What happens now? Now I go home, sleep, try to figure out what my life looks like without the family I thought I had. And the firm, I didn't want to be managing partner. I never did. We stopped at the revolving doors. I just want the firm my grandfather built to be run by people who actually care about it, not people who see it as their personal inheritance. Wu nodded slowly. The partners will want to meet with you, discuss transition plans, your role going forward. I know, but not today. I pushed through the door, felt the San Francisco sunlight hit my face. Today, I just need to be Iris Chen, not a partner, not a victim, not a symbol. And tomorrow, I looked back at Chen Tower, 38 stories of glass and steel bearing my family's name. Tomorrow, I start building something new. May 19th, 2025. Richard Chen signed his resignation letter at 3:00 p.m. I wasn't there. I learned about it through an email from Robert Hartley. Miss Chen, your father has tendered his resignation effective June 15th, 2025. The partners have appointed me as interim managing partner while we conduct a search for permanent leadership. Additionally, the partners have voted to offer you a formal position, Director of Impact Investing. This role would allow you to participate in major decisions while you determine your long-term relationship with the firm. Please let me know your thoughts. Regards, Robert Hartley. I read the email 3 times, habit, and then forwarded it to Patricia Wu for review. Her response came within an hour. Fair offer, no hidden strings. Congratulations, Iris. That evening, an all-staff email went out to the Chen Holdings team. Effective June 15th, Richard Chen will step down as managing partner. Robert Hartley will serve as interim managing partner. Additionally, the partners welcome Iris Chen as Director of Impact Investing in her capacity as majority partner. We thank Richard for his years of service and wish him well in future endeavors. My phone buzzed with messages. Colleagues I'd worked beside for 2 years, people who'd never learned my name, suddenly wanted to have coffee, to reconnect, to catch up. I ignored most of them, but one message stood out. From Maria Santos, an executive assistant who'd started at the firm in 1990, who'd worked directly with my grandfather. Iris, Samuel used to talk about you constantly. He said you saw connections others missed. I never understood what he meant until today. Welcome to the partnership. He'd be so proud. I saved that message. Some validation doesn't come from family. Sometimes that's better. 1 week later, the story went public. San Francisco Business Times, Chen Holdings shakeup. Founder's granddaughter takes control after secret trust surfaces. The article didn't name me directly. Corporate privacy laws prevented that, but anyone in Bay Area venture circles knew exactly who it was about. In a dramatic turn of events, the heir apparent to the Chen Holdings empire has been displaced by a previously unknown family member. Sources close to the partners described the transition as long overdue and cite concerns about the former managing partner's management style. Richard and Vivian canceled their appearance at the Asian Art Museum Gala. Health reasons. According to their publicist, 3 limited partners requested meetings with me personally, not with my father, not with the partners, but with me. Two of them, after an hour-long conversation each, confirmed they'd continue their relationship with Chen Holdings. "We've had concerns about Richard's leadership for years," one admitted. "Your grandfather built something special. It's good to see his vision protected." The social fallout rippled outward. Friends of my parents suddenly remembered previous engagements. Invitations to charity events dried up. The Chen name, which had once opened every door in Pacific Heights, now carried an asterisk. I didn't celebrate their humiliation, but I didn't mourn it either. Margaret Fong called me on Saturday morning. "How are you holding up?" "I don't know yet. Ask me in 6 months." "Fair enough." A pause. "Samuel would have handled it exactly the same way, you know." Vote of confidence instead of termination, giving him a chance he didn't deserve. She laughed softly. "He always said mercy was the ultimate power move." I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. Mercy wasn't weakness. Mercy was choice. And for the first time, the choice had been mine. June 7th, 2025. 3 weeks after the partners' meeting, my phone rang at 2:00 p.m. Iris. My mother's voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Can we talk? Just us." I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop in the Mission. Neutral territory, no chance of Richard appearing with lawyers. Vivian was already there when I arrived. She looked older somehow. The careful makeup couldn't hide the exhaustion beneath. "Thank you for coming." She wrapped her hands around a cup she hadn't touched. "I know I don't deserve it." "What do you want, Mom?" "To apologize." The word came out cracked. "For everything. For the way we treated you. For the things we said. For the things we didn't say." "Are you apologizing because you're sorry or because everything changed?" She flinched. The question hung between us like smoke. "Both," she finally admitted. "I'm ashamed to say it, but both." Her eyes welled. "I was so focused on Julian's success, on maintaining appearances. I told myself we were protecting you from expectations you couldn't meet. But that was a lie. I told myself so I wouldn't have to feel guilty. You let Dad call me worthless in front of family, in front of business partners. You never defended me, not once." "I know." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I know, and I can never undo it, but Iris, I don't want to lose you entirely. I don't know if that's even possible anymore, but I had to try." I looked at this woman who'd been my mother for 27 years, who'd braided my hair as a child and forgotten my birthday as an adult. "I can't pretend the last 19 years didn't happen," I said slowly, "but I'm willing to try building something new. Something honest." She nodded, unable to speak. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. July 2025, 2 months later, Julian called while I was walking through Golden Gate Park. I almost didn't answer. "Iris, I know I have no right to ask, but can we meet? There's something I need to say." We sat on a bench near the Conservatory of Flowers. The July heat pressed down like a weight. Julian looked different. The armor of perfection he'd worn his whole life had cracked. Dark circles under his eyes, hair pulled back carelessly. "I've been in therapy," he said without preamble. "Since May, 3 times a week." "That's good." "It's brutal." He laughed humorlessly. "Turns out being the golden child isn't actually a gift, it's a different kind of cage." I waited. Dad expected me to be perfect. Every deal, every promotion, every accolade was never enough. It was just the baseline for what came next. He stared at the fountain. "And the way they treated you." I told myself it was just how things were, that you were different, that I was protecting you by not challenging them. "You weren't protecting me." "No, I was protecting myself, because if I defended you, I became a target too." He finally looked at me. "That's not an excuse, it's just the truth." "What do you want from me, Julian?" "Nothing, I don't deserve anything." His voice cracked. "I just wanted you to know, I see you now, really see you, and I'm sorry I didn't look sooner." We sat in silence, 2 siblings who'd grown up in the same house as strangers. "I can't go back to how things were," I said finally, "but I'm not interested in staying enemies either. Maybe we start over from scratch." Julian's eyes filled with tears. "I'd like that." It wasn't the sibling relationship I'd wanted as a child, but maybe it could become something real. September 2025, 4 months after the partners' meeting, I moved into my own apartment in Berkeley. 1 bedroom, pre-war building, a view of the campus where my grandfather had walked to his first investment meeting in 1972. The rent was more than I'd ever paid, but I could afford it now. My new salary as Director of Impact Investing at Chen Holdings, $195,000 a year, plus dividends from my shares. The title was my idea, a new division focused on climate tech, sustainable infrastructure, social impact assessments, the kind of innovation my grandfather would have championed if he'd lived to see it. Richard called once a month now, short conversations, polite. He asked about the weather, about my new apartment, about work. We both pretended the past hadn't happened. It was easier that way. Vivian and I had lunch every other week. Slowly, awkwardly, she was learning to see me as a person instead of a problem. It wasn't the mother-daughter relationship I dreamed of, but it was honest, which was more than we'd ever had. Julian and I got coffee on weekends sometimes. We were learning each other, really learning for the first time. He told me about the pressure he'd carried. I told him about the loneliness. Neither of us pretended the past was okay, but we were writing a new story. On the wall of my apartment, I'd hung my grandfather's portrait, the same one that had watched over the conference room for 50 years. Sometimes, when the evening light hit it just right, I could almost see him smiling. "You did it, Grandpa," I thought. "You gave me the tools, I just had to be brave enough to use them." 6 months ago, I was invisible. Now I was finally fully myself. Looking back, I understand something now that I couldn't have understood at 26. My grandfather didn't leave me 52% of his firm because I was better than Julian. He left it to me because he knew I wouldn't let power corrupt me the way it had corrupted my father. ADHD isn't my flaw. It's part of who I am, like my spatial memory, my pattern recognition, my patience, my ability to see connections others miss. The things that made me forgetful in my parents' eyes were the same things that made me see the truth when everyone else looked away. Richard judged worth by credentials, by degrees, by performance. Samuel judged worth by character, by kindness, by the way people treated those who couldn't keep up. And now, finally, I get to judge my own worth. Not by what my parents say, not by what my brother achieved, not by what any stranger on the internet thinks. By my own standard, my own measure, my own truth. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in my story. If you've ever been the overlooked one, the dismissed one, the one they said would never amount to anything, I want you to know something. You don't need a secret inheritance to prove your value, but you do need to give yourself permission to stop seeking approval from people who will never give it. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. They let you decide who gets access to your life and on what terms. My family hurt me for 27 years, but I didn't need to hurt them back to find peace. I just needed to stop waiting for them to see me and start seeing myself. That's the real inheritance my grandfather left me, and nobody can ever take it away. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you that your worth isn't determined by the people who failed to see it, I want to hear from you. Subscribe, hit the bell, leave a comment telling me your story. And if you want more stories like this, stories about ordinary people who found the courage to stand up for themselves, check the link in the description. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Until next time.